In the last video, we spoke about the top 8 best value players in FPL 2021/22 season. Today we're going to be doing the complete opposite, where we talk about the worst value players, but this time I have 10 players. Reason being is because it is much easier to find 10 players that are overpriced than it was to find 10 players that are pretty much at bargain price. So I just want to say as well that the players that I have on this list, you might think I'm crazy, but I'm going to give my reason for every single player. I've got a few premium players on here. If you don't know what a premium player is, they are basically players that are on the upper scale of the price. So I'd say 9.5 million plus. So the big players, the big names basically that people pick. I've definitely got a few of them on here, but I'll be giving my reason for every single player. I just want to say as well, it is not biased. No way, shape or form is not biased. The reason you're not going to see players like Willian on here, even though it's 6.5 million, is because people obviously watch this video and play fantasy, know about fantasy. They're not stupid enough to pick Willian in the first place. So there's no point of me including him on the list. The 10 players that I've got on this list are definitely players that people will be looking at or even contemplating putting in their team every single week. These are definitely players that will find themselves in my team at one point of the game. Well, some of them, definitely, because I've got massive names on here. But some of these players will definitely find themselves in my team. I just want you guys to know that. So when you do see them in my team, you're not calling me a hypocrite and this and that. Talking about teams, the team in the background has changed since the last video as well, because I have started drafting here and there. My next video is actually going to be a draft video where we start talking about my first team, and I might do 1 or 2 different teams and talk about different solutions. I'm going to probably do that once every week until the season starts, so until game week 1, until the very last second of game week 1 of the transfer deadline, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think that's enough talking. I think we can get straight into this video. Make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe, because I did see in my last video as well that 90% of people that watched the video weren't subscribed. I just want to say as well, I did actually gain a couple subs off that video as well. So I want to thank whoever did subscribe from that video. Thank you, basically. I don't know how I was going to phrase that any other way. But yeah, let's get straight into the video. So the first player that we're going to be talking about is Harry Kane. Now, I warned you guys, I've got massive names on here. 12.5 million, however, is a bit too much for Harry Kane. I think last season, he was around 10.5 to 11.5 million. I can't remember exactly how much, but he was definitely not 12 million or more. Now, the reason I think he's costing way too much is because he's joint most expensive with a player that easily earns that spot, Mohamed Salah. Now, I know Harry Kane got the most goals, he got the golden boot, and he also got the most assists, along with the most bonus points in FPL last season. However, that is no excuse for him to be 12.5 million. I think 11.5 million was actually a very good price for Harry Kane. The reason that I say is too much is because whereas Salah is competing for the league, and also outside of the Prem, they're competing for the Champions League. I know you can't talk about European competitions when it comes to the Premier League, Fantasy Premier League, but I think it's a good comparison to make, because Harry Kane is not really competing for anything right now at Tottenham. He himself even said if he didn't win a trophy by 3 years, he was going to leave. And there's actually big talk of him going to Man City. So if he becomes a Man City player by the time the season starts, my whole view on him changes, because Man City are a much better attacking team than Tottenham for sure, and we know Man City can score whenever they want, which is why I feel like 12.5 million in a Man City shirt would have been a bit more understandable and a bit more reasonable, and he probably wouldn't even be in this list. But as a Tottenham player, and as a player that's not really competing for the league, they are competing for top 4, but they didn't make it last season, and I think the position of teams has a major impact on the value of players as well. So to not make top 4, but then be priced at 12.5 million, in my opinion, is just too much. Because in the last video I talked about the best value players, and I mentioned a bunch of forwards. You know, just to mention two names, we looked at Ollie Watkins, who was 7.5, and Iheanacho, who was 7.5. That's 15 million together. That's only 2.5 million more than Harry Kane alone. So if you play fantasy religiously and you like to strategize things properly, would you rather have two good enough strikers who can definitely score goals, or would you rather have one striker for 12.5 million and then we'll probably have to have him as a lone striker, because 12.5 million is not cheap. If you're going to give him a partner, a decent enough partner at a decent enough price, for example, Calvert-Lewin, who's 8 million, you're looking at 20.5 million alone for two players, and you've still got to pick a backup forward, 5 midfielders, 5 defenders, and 2 goalkeepers. Now, I know people like to do this thing where they pick the worst priced player, 4 million, and then pick players that are good enough. But imagine one of those players blank and you don't have a good enough bench. The question that I'm going to leave you guys with basically is, would you rather have a good enough attack with Watkins and Iheanacho, who can definitely score goals, or have one player at 12.5 million and then have to average down and have worse players around him, basically, if he's going to be a premium player? I just feel like there's other premium players in the game that are better. Mentioned one already, Mohamed Salah. In my opinion, Salah is worth 12.5 million because he's competing for the league as well, and he has shown that he can score goals. You know, I think he was at the top of the league for a couple of weeks as well last season before Harry Kane started getting his numbers up. And when Harry Kane does score, it's not like he's scoring consistently every week. He can blank for 2-3 weeks and then get his goals all in one game, and then blank for another 3 weeks. And that's just, people won't want to admit that, but that is the genuine truth. And we've seen that last season, because he rose his own numbers. I was going to say risen his own numbers, but he rose his own numbers more towards the end of last season. And another point I want to make with Tottenham and their expensively priced players is, if they're versing a team, no disrespect to any teams I'm going to mention, but when they're versing an easier opponent for them basically, like Newcastle, like Brentford, like Norwich, I would personally go for someone like Son. He's 10 million. That's a perfect price for him. He rose as well from last season, but his one is much more reasonable and much more understandable. 10 million is a very good price, and I'd rather go for him, because although Harry Kane plays in number 9, we all know how he plays. He plays very deep. Son plays on the left-hand side of a 3, so you know he's in an attack. He's in and around the box as well. So, and I don't even need to explain that. He got the goals. He got the numbers last season. It's just a no-brainer when it comes to the easier opponents. It's Son all day, every day. Obviously, form and whatever can absolutely throw me out the window here, because if Kane is on the form of his life, obviously you would go for Kane and then have worse players around him. But in my opinion, you'd save the 2.5 million, go for Son, and go for a better team around, because it's just makes more sense. It's more strategic. You can have better players on the bench if anyone in the starting 11 blanks. But that's just my opinion. Kane, he's way too much as a forward as well. That's a very crucial position in fantasy. Not many people go with one up front. They go with, I've seen a lot of 3 up front. You know, I don't really see 2 either. So that's just my opinion. That's just what I've seen. That's just all from my point of view. The next player is Timo Werner, another striker, and this one I think I'll get a lot more agreements with from the viewers, because him at 9 million, for someone who didn't even prove himself last season in the Prem, you can't talk about European competitions and how Chelsea won the Champions League. You just can't do that, because this is FPL. This is about Premier League and the numbers that people pull out in the Prem. Timo Werner was not one of those players who pulled out numbers. If anything, he showed his bad side, because there were chances that no striker should miss. I could have scored them, and I'm not even good at football. So it's surprising that this guy kept his value of 9 million. I'm pretty sure he was 9 million or even 9.5 last season. So he's either stayed the same or only dropped 0.5 million. I don't think we're going to see this guy very much unless he improves, because we all saw it with Nicolas Pepe. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of Arsenal references, but being an Arsenal fan, I obviously watched them a lot more than anyone else. Nicolas Pepe showed his worth last season. Well, a bit of it anyway. He definitely improved from the first season that he was in the Prem. That could be the same situation for Timo Werner, and also for Timo Werner's teammate Kai Havertz. I've got them both on this list because Kai Havertz, even at 8.5 million, is too much. And the reason being is if you're looking at Chelsea midfielders that are going to play consistently, that are going to be cheaper than Kai Havertz, you're looking at someone like Mason Mount, who's 7.5 million. Even Ziyech, who I think will be given more minutes this season. Obviously, last season he got injured. He's also 7.5 million. So there's definitely going to be a lot of rotation in the Chelsea team as well. We saw that last season as well. You couldn't always rely on Kai Havertz to start. I mean, that's just proven. Last season he didn't get as many minutes as he would have wanted. And he's costing 8.5 million. He's costing more than Mason Mount. Mason Mount has definitely proved himself more in the Prem last season than Kai Havertz. And Kai Havertz is more expensive, which I just don't agree with. In my opinion, Kai Havertz, you won't really see him next season in many people's teams either, unless his form goes absolutely through the roof. But yeah, I think Werner and Kai Havertz are definitely two players that I can be agreed on with a lot more than maybe Harry Kane. Because Harry Kane, I can understand why people might disagree. People might think he is definitely worth his 12.5 million. He's definitely earned it, but at the same time, it's too much. It's way too much for a player like Harry Kane. That's not really challenging for anything in the league. But yeah, Kai Havertz, Werner, way too much in my opinion. The next player is Chris Wood. I think Kane, Werner, Havertz, I can understand where the arguments will come from. But Chris Wood, 7 million for a team that's not even challenging for the top 10, realistically. Chris Wood didn't really do numbers last season either. I think if he did hit double digits, he just about did it. 7 million for a Burnley forward is just way too much. And there's rotation there as well. You know, Ashley Barnes definitely can start in front of him. He's even still a Burnley player. I don't really keep up with Burnley. But Ashley Barnes can definitely start in front of him. They start together as a two a lot, but when they do, it's harder for one of them to get more goals. It's just too much for 7 million. For me, this guy shouldn't even be more than 6 million. 6 million should be his cap. 7 million, slap on an extra 0.5, and you're getting someone like Iheanacho, who is in a team where he's surrounded by much better players and can definitely score more goals, as proven from last season. Slap on another 0.5, you can get Richarlison. Slap on another million, you can get Calvert-Lewin. There's just so many better options. Or even take away 0.5 million and you can get someone like St. Maxim. Take away 1.5 million, you can get someone like Troy Deeney, who were all featured in my last video. So I think I backed my point up very well when it comes to Chris Wood. There's no way that a Burnley forward should be costing 7 million, especially with the numbers he did. There's no way his numbers were good enough to be risen or bumped up in price so much. Well, I say so much, I don't even remember. I think he was like 6 million last season, so he was only bumped up around 1 million. But it's about him being 7 million, which is the frustrating part, because I did actually have him in my team at one point of last season, because he was at a decent enough price. But being 7 million, I just cannot see him in my team at all in the upcoming season. Next player is Sadio Mane. Now this is another name similar to Harry Kane. Premium, definitely a premium player. But like I said, another 0.5 million and you're getting someone better in Salah. Salah is a proven goal scorer. So is Mane. Mane is definitely a proven goal scorer. But he didn't have the best of seasons last season, and he still went up in price. I'm pretty sure he was less than 12 million, if I'm not mistaken, last season. But this season he's gone, or maybe he was even 12 million last season. But to go up to, or even stay at 12 million when you only got 11 goals, compared to the 2 seasons before where you got 18 goals and 22 goals, is poor from fantasy, I must say, because he is definitely not kept that £12 million price tag. Even 11 million I think would have been a bit too much for Mane, because he just wasn't good enough last season. He said it himself. He literally said it himself that this was a very bad season on his half. And I think for him, 10 million or 10.5 million, 11 million max. I know I said that he's not still worth 11 million, but as a maximum price, that would have been reasonable. But at 12 million, I just don't think he did enough to earn that price tag, especially when Salah is coming in at 12.5 and Harry Kane is coming at 12.5 million, but he did earn it, like I said. But it's just the fact that it's Harry Kane and that he plays for Spurs that is a bit too much. But being only 0.5 million less than the Golden Boot winner, who got probably 10 more goals, I think it was, more than Sadio Mane, it's not good enough. So if you're going to go for a Liverpool midfielder and everyone's fit, it's obviously going to be Salah for that 0.5 million, because like I said, the bargained players there are this season on fantasy, you can definitely save that 0.5 million and use it on a better player, in this case his teammate Salah. I think this point is backed up. I think everyone can understand where I'm coming from when I say that is too much for Mane, and I think everyone can understand when I say that there are better solutions out there for less, and for obviously 0.5 more, because 12.5 million is the most. So he's the second most expensive player, obviously joint with other players, because I'm pretty sure Bruno and Kevin De Bruyne are both 12 million as well. So, you know, take of that what you will. The next player I've got here is another Liverpool man, Firmino. This one is self-explanatory. I'm not going to waste too much time. He's not a prolific goal scorer, and for him to hold a value of 9 million, because he was 9.5 million last season, for him to be only 9 million, as in only a 0.5 deficit, is not good enough, because he doesn't score goals as a striker. Don't get me wrong, he is probably technically gifted and one of the best at that in the Prem. When I say probably most gifted, I meant probably the most technically gifted in the Premier League. But he doesn't score enough goals for a striker. I think last season he only got like 8 or 9 goals, something like that. Didn't even hit double digits. If he did, same situation as Chris Wood, he just about, but I'm pretty sure he didn't. But yeah, he should not even be. I think a good price for Firmino would have been 7.5 to 8 million. I don't have to explain this one too much. Everyone knows that Firmino does not score enough as a striker. He said it himself. Liverpool fans have said it. I think I'm going to be agreed with by most people on this one. So I'm going to go straight to the next player. He's just not worth 9 million, man. He's not been worth for a couple seasons now. For about 3 seasons now, he's not been worth his fantasy price. The next player is Raheem Sterling. Now this one is definitely more arguable, because 11 million for a guy that can definitely be rotated a lot more than anyone else in the league, or definitely anyone else on this list, because we all know the amount of players that Man City have in Sterling's position. They have Mahrez, who's 9 million. They have Foden, who's 8 million. They have Bernardo Silva, who's 7 million. 7 million for Bernardo Silva is an absolute steal, by the way, but he wasn't bargained enough to be on the top valued players in the last video. But 7 million, that's a very good price for a player like Bernardo Silva, man. And then obviously they've got Gabriel Jesus up front, who's like 8.5 million. So if you're going to go for anyone, you'd probably go for one of those 4. Raheem Sterling got 11 million. To waste that much money and use him as one of your premium players, like I said, when there's only 1.5 million more for Salah, or when there's, you know, the 1 million more for Bruno, and then you can average out your strikers for Iheanacho, who's 7.5 million. There's just so many better options than having this guy in your team for 11 million, especially when he can be rotated as easily as he can. This has been the same situation for Sterling for about 3 seasons now as well. Definitely last season, he definitely wasn't worth it as well. Although he did get a decent enough number of goals, in my opinion, he just wasn't worth it when there's just so many other better players that you could get for less money or even the same price. But yeah, again, another pretty self-explanatory one. I think people will agree with me on this one as well. So we can go on to the next player, who is Patrick Bamford. Now this one is a bit more arguable. 8 million for Patrick Bamford is a bit much, in my opinion. 8 million for a Leeds player in general is a bit much, in my opinion. He rose from 6.5 million, so he got a price increase of 1.5 million. If he had gone up to 7.5 million, I think that would have been a lot more reasonable. But that 0.5 million makes a lot of difference, like I have mentioned a million times in this video alone when I was talking about, I think I've mentioned Salah's name about 50 times now. It's all about that 0.5 million. It's a massive decider in whether or not he's in your team. I know he's a good striker. He scored a lot of goals last season. He got a few assists as well. I think he got around 5 to 7 assists. He's definitely, he can definitely be 8 million. He can definitely be an £8 million player. It's just about his form. Because there were definitely games last season where I had him in my team. I even had him as captain against teams that they should have beaten and he should have scored against, but he didn't. So that's the thing with when you're looking at teams like Leeds and you're looking at their more expensive players. It's all about who you pick. Because I use the same example in this video with Mane and Salah and the 0.5 difference and who you would pick from that team. It's the same situation I'm going to use here and yesterday's video. Rafinha, he's 6.5 million. Who would you rather go for? Would you rather save that 0.5 million and go for Rafinha, or have to get in Bamford and then average down the other players based on their fixtures? It's an arguable one. I can understand why people might think that Bamford is worth it, but in my opinion, he was priced just a tiny bit too high. 7.5 million would have been a perfect price for him, and I'm going to stick with that. The next player is Anthony Martial. Now this one, should he even be 7 million? Because for a forward, I think he only got like 4 goals last season in the Prem. And then, or maybe even, it was probably like 7 goals and 4 assists. But he played about 28 games or something. No, actually, I'm losing it. He probably played more than that. He's definitely played more than 25 in the Premier League last season. And he's kept his value of 8 million. That for me is, I can't understand that one at all. I cannot understand that one at all. I don't understand why he is 8 million. I doubt we're going to see this guy picked at all next season. If we do, it's probably going to be against teams like Brentford and Norwich. No disrespect to them. But in my opinion, that's how it's going to be. Especially now with Jadon Sancho coming in. Probably Rafael Varane coming in. I know the defenders don't really impact the forwards, but the dynamic of the team can change. And it's going to be harder for Martial to get minutes, especially when Rashford is now slowly getting into his prime. Cavani is there as well. Bruno is there in the number 10, so Martial is definitely not getting that position. The right hand side has a rotation between Sancho, Greenwood and many other players. Dan James. Talking about Greenwood, he is also on my list and the last player on the list. 7.5 million. Now, I'm not saying Greenwood is a bad player. I'm not hating on him because we have this whole argument about who's the better youngster, Saka, Greenwood, Foden, whoever. It's because 7.5 million on such a young player who's not a first team player really is way too much. Now, you're looking at the same price as Diogo Jota, who was in the last video, in the best valued players. Now there's no way you can have Diogo Jota and Mason Greenwood at the same price, especially for what they offer. I feel like Jota helps Liverpool a lot more than Greenwood helps United, because when you're looking at United and you look at the players that help, it's going to definitely be the players like Bruno, like Rashford and like Cavani. 7.5 million for a player that, yeah, he got double figures in all comps last season, but in the Prem, was he really a player that was being spoken about? And for Saka, who in my opinion did better in the Prem last season, who had more impact on the whole team as a player, to be 6.5 million, a whole million less than Greenwood, it just doesn't make sense in my head. Now I don't want to sit here and start this argument about Saka and Greenwood. I think I might even do that for another video where I got United fans and I get Arsenal fans to argue about this. But 7.5 million, I think people can agree with me on that. But those are 10 players that I think are just not valued properly, and they were valued too high. I think they were valued based on 1 or 2 good games they had here and there, in my opinion. Except for a few. Kane definitely earned his price, but I gave my reason for him being on this list. Who else? Who else is on this list? Bamford, I can understand why he's 8 million. I can understand why people might disagree with me. So it's pretty much just Kane and Bamford, actually. Yeah, it's pretty much just Kane and Bamford. Everyone else is valued too high, in my opinion. That's, like I've said it 10 times. I've said that keyword a million times now. My opinion. So if you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments below. Obviously, let me know your thoughts if there's anyone else that should have been on this list. My next video is going to be a draft of my first team. I'm going to do 1 or 2 teams like I said earlier on. But other than that, make sure you guys like, share, comment and subscribe. Like I said, 90% of people watching the last video were not subscribed. So let's change that and make those 90% of people subscribe. I did get a lot of support on the last video as well, like I also mentioned at the start of this video. But I just want to thank you guys again. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say here. And I can pretty much see you guys in the next video.